My daughter constantly mocked me, calling me old and useless behind my back. One evening, I pretended to collapse in the living room. She looked at me, stepped back, and whispered, "I'm not dealing with this today." I got up, perfectly fine. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, if you enjoy stories like this, you want to be part of the 10% of our viewers who click on the like button. This really makes us happy. If you are yet to subscribe to our channel, kindly support us today by subscribing to this channel. This helps us to bring you more beautiful stories. It will be great to tell us where you are watching us from in the comments section. Now let's get into the details of the story. There was a time when my daughter used to cling to my arm in crowded parking lots, her little fingers gripping my hand like I was the anchor to her entire world. I used to think about that when I watched her now, scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging me when I passed through the living room. She was 24, technically an adult, but emotionally adrift, spoiled by convenience and the kind of love that forgave too much. I had raised her alone after her father left when she was 8. I worked 2 jobs, packed her lunches with little notes inside, drove her to dance rehearsals even when I had to be up by for the next morning. Every decision I made from the day she was born was for her benefit. But somewhere between senior year of high school and her 3rd attempt at community college, the gratitude turned into entitlement. She stopped seeing me as a parent and started treating me like her bank account with a face. I first noticed it in whispers. Not to me, of course, never to my face, but to her friends, to her phone, to her cousin Kimmy when they thought I was upstairs. "She's so ancient. I swear she doesn't get how anything works anymore," she said once, laughing from the kitchen while I sat frozen at the top of the staircase, the grocery bag still in my hands. Another time, after I had reminded her to take out the trash, she muttered, "Maybe if she wasn't so useless, I wouldn't have to live like this." Like this? In a house she didn't pay for, with meals she didn't cook, with bills she didn't even think to check. Each word landed like a slap I couldn't respond to. I swallowed it all, chalking it up to immaturity, to stress, to anything that made me feel like it wasn't really about me. But the cracks were spreading, and I couldn't pretend they weren't there. I kept giving, kept paying her car note, her phone bill, even her therapy sessions when she said she felt overwhelmed by life. I canceled a weekend trip I'd been planning for months just to help her pay rent when she was between jobs again. Though she never offered to pay me back, and I never asked. Because that's what mothers do, right? They carry the burden without complaint. But I was tired, not just in the physical sense, but in the soul-deep way that makes you forget what joy used to feel like. I started staying at work longer just to avoid the tension at home. My colleagues thought I was committed. Really, I just didn't want to walk through my own front door. I began to feel like a tenant in my own life. Resented, dismissed, invisible. The final straw came on a Thursday evening, when her cousin Kimmy stopped by unannounced. I was in the laundry room folding towels when I heard them talking in the kitchen. Kimmy said something about me still doing her laundry, and my daughter laughed, a laugh that sounded like cruelty, not joy. "She still thinks she's useful," she said. "Like it's sad. Honestly, I don't even know why I stay here. Probably just waiting for the house." My knees buckled. I dropped a towel. I had to press my hand against the washer to keep from collapsing. Not because I was shocked. No, I think deep down I knew this version of her had been growing for a while. But because she said it so casually, like I was already gone, like my worth was measured only in property and paperwork. I waited until they went upstairs, and then I walked out into the night, aimless, just trying to catch my breath. I didn't cry. Not then. I didn't have the strength. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind was a carousel of memories. Birthday parties I planned down to the last balloon, nights spent nursing her through the flu, college applications I filled out for her while she binge-watched TV. I thought about all the times I defended her to family members who said I was too lenient, too generous. I had believed, foolishly, that unconditional love would eventually teach her to love back. Instead, it taught her that I was a doormat. And now, I couldn't stop replaying that one word over and over. Useless. That's what she thought of me. Not just unappreciated, disposable. The next morning, she asked me to Venmo her money for a nail appointment. I stared at her for a long moment. She didn't notice. She never did. I said nothing, just nodded and pulled out my phone. But I didn't send the money. I opened a new note and typed 3 words instead: make her see. Something had to change. I was tired of pretending. I wasn't useless. And I was going to show her just how valuable I could be by taking everything she took for granted and showing her what life looked like without it. It took me 2 days to plan it. I didn't want it to feel theatrical or cruel. I just wanted it to feel real enough to rattle her, to make her stop, for once, and look at me like I was human again. I waited until she was home, headphones in, but volume low enough to hear the TV. I made sure the kitchen light was on, the table half set for dinner. It was just past 7 when I let myself fall onto the living room carpet. I didn't hurt myself, but I went down hard enough for the sound to carry. One arm splayed out, my chest still. I waited. 1 second. 2. 3. Her footsteps approached, slow and annoyed. I could hear her sigh before she even spoke. And then, with a voice that iced every vein in my body, she said it. I'm not dealing with this today. No panic. No urgency. Just exhaustion, like I was some chore she'd forgotten to delegate. I could feel the heat rising behind my closed eyelids. I opened them, sat up. Our eyes met. For a moment, she looked afraid. But it wasn't fear for me. It was fear of consequence, of being caught. You're fine? She asked, like she wasn't sure if she was in trouble. I nodded. Then next time, try calling my name or something. She mumbled, already walking back toward her room. The door clicked shut. I sat there a long time. The lights dimmed. The night fell in layers around me. And I knew I was done. I didn't say anything the next day. Silence was my armor. She asked me for coffee money. I said I was busy. She asked why the Netflix account wasn't working. I said maybe it was a glitch. She rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath. I just smiled. Quietly. Patiently. I called the insurance company on my lunch break and had her removed. Called the bank and closed the joint credit card. Called the lawyer and asked for a new appointment. There was a strange power in those phone calls. Not revenge, not yet. But agency. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. At dinner, she asked me what was for takeout. I said nothing. I just looked up and said, I'm not dealing with this today. Her face twisted, like she couldn't process hearing her own words mirrored back. She tossed her fork onto the table and stormed off. I listened to her door slam and felt something unfamiliar swell in my chest. Not guilt, not sadness, something closer to peace. A reckoning had begun. That Monday morning, I walked into the law office wearing the same beige trench coat I had owned for 15 years, but I held myself like I was someone entirely new. The receptionist smiled and asked if I was here for a consultation, and I smiled back, calm, controlled. I had made an appointment with Mr. Delgado, the attorney who helped with my original will years ago, back when my daughter was still a teenager and I was still convinced she would grow into her better self. We had talked about guardianship, about college funds, about making sure she would be protected if anything happened to me. Sitting in that same office now, I felt the weight of all the ways I had been wrong. Not just about her, but about myself and about how far I had let things go. Mr. Delgado greeted me kindly, his voice the same blend of warmth and professionalism I remembered. As he walked me to his office, he asked, So what brings you back? Everything all right with your estate? I sat down in the leather chair across from his desk and folded my hands over my lap. I need to make changes, I said simply. I pulled out a manila folder from my bag. Inside were account closures, statements, and a draft letter I had written to myself outlining everything she no longer had access to. His eyebrows rose slightly as he flipped through the documents, then nodded. We can update everything, he said. Who would you like as your new beneficiary? I paused. I thought about Kimmy, the cousin who always called me on holidays, who once sent me soup when I was sick. I thought about the animal shelter I volunteered at years ago. I even thought about just leaving everything to a scholarship fund. Anyone but her, I said. It wasn't meant to be cruel. But I realized, in that moment, that I had spent so long tethering my self-worth to her validation, to her imagined redemption arc. I kept believing she would turn around, apologize, hug me like she used to. But that fantasy had died on the living room floor 3 nights ago when she saw me sprawled out, and chose to walk away. So I did the paperwork, signed the forms, initialed every page. When I left that office, my feet felt lighter than they had in years. Not because I was free of responsibility, but because I was finally honoring myself. That afternoon, I called the cell phone provider and canceled the line I'd been paying for since she was 14. I pulled up her auto-pay rent and disconnected it. I made a spreadsheet to track everything she had been getting from me, and I closed every tab one by one. Each cancellation was its own little funeral, not for her, but for the version of me who thought I didn't have a choice. By the time dinner came around, she was already texting me. "Mom, my phone's not working. Can you call AT&T?" I didn't respond. A few hours later, "Why is my card declining? Did you cancel something?" She didn't come downstairs until almost midnight, her face puffy and red, phone in hand like it was a piece of broken glass. "What is going on?" she demanded. "Why is everything cut off?" I stayed seated on the couch, a blanket over my legs, tea cooling on the table. "I made some changes," I said. "To the will, to the bills, to everything, really." Her eyes widened and then narrowed. "You're punishing me? For what? For not freaking out when you fake passed out? Are you serious?" I looked at her for a long time. She was still standing there like I owed her an explanation. "No," I said finally. "I'm not punishing you. I'm just done rewarding you for treating me like I'm nothing." She let out a bitter laugh. "This is insane. You're ruining your own family." I felt my jaw tighten, but my voice stayed even. "No, you did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess." She stormed out again, her door slamming with a finality that used to scare me. But now, it just sounded like closure. It started with a voicemail. I came home from the grocery store and there it was, blinking red on the answering machine, an artifact of another era that I hadn't gotten rid of mostly because I liked the weight of its silence. But today it buzzed. Her voice came through, choked up and high-pitched. "I can't believe you're doing this," she sniffled. "I can't believe you just cut me off without even talking to me like a real person. Like your daughter. How could you do this to me?" The message cut off abruptly, like even the machine had tired of her performance. I stood in the hallway, holding a bag of apples and cereal, and stared at the wall for a long time. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I felt resolved, like the last door had closed, and I was finally standing on my own side. The confrontation didn't come until the next evening. She had spent the night out, probably trying to piece together some plan B now that I was no longer underwriting her life. When she came through the door, she didn't even say hello. She threw her keys on the table with a clatter and marched straight into the kitchen, where I was finishing up dishes. "We need to talk," she said sharply, like she was the one who had been betrayed. I turned off the faucet, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and leaned against the counter. "Then talk." Her arms were crossed, face twisted in some mixture of rage and disbelief. "How dare you just cut me off? You didn't even warn me. My therapist said this is financial abuse." For a moment, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it all landed so heavy I had to let it out somehow. "Abuse." I repeated. "You want to talk about abuse? What do you call years of mockery, entitlement, and emotional neglect?" She blinked at me like she couldn't believe I had dared speak to her that way. "You were supposed to support me," she shouted. "That's what parents do. You don't just stop being a mom because your feelings are hurt." My voice was low when I answered, but every word cut sharp. "I didn't stop being your mom. You stopped being my daughter. You stopped being kind. You stopped being grateful. You stopped being someone I recognized." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I had cried enough for both of us. "You think I'm old and useless?" I said. "Then act like it. Go figure life out without me. Let's see how useless I really am." She sobbed then, the loud, ugly kind of cry that once would have shattered me. But I didn't move to comfort her. That instinct had been burned out of me. She collapsed into one of the kitchen chairs, face in her hands, and mumbled, "I didn't mean it. I was just frustrated. You're always in my space. You don't understand what it's like to be me." I felt my heart twist, not with sympathy, but with that old, familiar ache of wanting to be understood. "You're right," I said. "I don't understand. I've worked every day since you were born. I've lived without backup, without breaks, without respect. Maybe I don't understand what it's like to be you, but you have no idea what it's like to be me. She looked up then, red-faced and desperate. We can fix this, she said. I'll be better. I'll pay rent or whatever. Just, please don't leave me like this. And there it was, the crux of it all. Not regret, not remorse, just fear. Fear of losing comfort. Fear of change. I wanted so badly to believe her, to reach for the soft part of me that used to bend every time she said, I'm sorry. But I'd bent so many times, I barely knew what it felt like to stand upright. I walked over to the table, leaned down, and looked her in the eye. You had years to fix this, I said. Years where I asked for respect. Years where I begged for connection. One moment of panic doesn't undo a lifetime of disregard. She started crying again, and I let her. It was her turn to feel it all. Her turn to sit in the discomfort of her choices. I turned away and walked back to the sink. My tea had gone cold, but I didn't mind. There was something grounding in the way the air felt now. Heavy, but honest. She didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. Her door stayed closed, and I didn't knock. The silence felt less like punishment and more like space. A wide, empty field where maybe, eventually, something new could grow, but only if we both stopped pretending the old thing hadn't already died. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone in the quiet. I felt free. The first call came from my sister Lana, voice already tight with judgment before I even said hello. What is going on over there? She asked. I just got off the phone with your daughter, and she's a wreck. I took a deep breath and stepped out onto the porch, letting the screen door creak shut behind me. The autumn air had that slight chill, the kind that carries more than just cold. It carries memory. What's going on? I said slowly. Is that I stopped paying to be mistreated. Lana made a scoffing sound. You cut her off completely? No warning? That's extreme, don't you think? I leaned against the porch rail and stared out at the dying leaves. Extreme is letting her mock me in my own home. Extreme is collapsing on the floor and hearing her say she didn't have time to deal with me. There was a pause. I could almost hear Lana weighing her response, trying to decide if she was going to side with blood or with behavior. She's young, she said finally. They say stupid things. They don't mean it. You know that. And maybe, once upon a time, that would have been enough for me. Maybe I would have swallowed my hurt and nodded and made excuses. But I was past that point. She's 24, not 14, I replied. She doesn't get to hide behind immaturity while demanding adult privileges. If she wants to live like I don't matter, then she can learn what that really feels like. The next call was from my cousin Trish, who had always been more like a sister than Lana ever was. Trish didn't start with accusations. She started with a story. You know, she said, my son told me he ran into your girl last week at the cafe. Said she looked like she'd seen a ghost. I smiled faintly. I bet she feels like her whole world is crumbling. Trish sighed. Maybe it is. But maybe it needed to. She was quiet for a moment. Listen, I'm not calling to tell you what to do. I just want to say I see you. I know this wasn't easy. And I hope you're not sitting over there second-guessing yourself. I wasn't. Not really. But I won't lie and say there wasn't a flicker of grief that moved through me like a cold wind through an open window. Not regret, but mourning, for the family I'd hoped I was building, for the daughter I used to imagine would grow up to be my friend. Thank you, I said, voice low. That means more than you know. She stayed on the line a few more minutes, talking about her garden, about the new puppy they'd just adopted. The normalcy of her tone soothed something raw in me. By the time we hung up, I felt a little less alone. But not everyone was as understanding. At church the following Sunday, I could feel the whispers. Not all of them had the full story, but they'd heard just enough to piece together their own version. One woman I barely knew put a hand on my arm during fellowship and said, I hope you and your daughter find your way back to each other. Life's too short to hold grudges. I gave her a polite smile, but my jaw clenched. Grudge? That word suggested pettiness, a slight blown out of proportion. What I'd done wasn't about resentment. It was about survival. About no longer offering up my spirit to be eroded for someone else's comfort. And yet, the eyes kept watching. Every family function felt like a stage. At my nephew's birthday party, I caught the tail end of a conversation between my daughter and her aunt. One of those pitying, martyr-driven dialogues where my daughter painted herself as the wounded child, abandoned by the one person she thought would never leave. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. I just poured myself a cup of punch and let them perform. If they needed a villain to feel righteous, so be it. I was done auditioning for anyone's approval. Still, the gossip wore on me. I'd spent decades building a reputation as the reliable one, the always-there aunt, the can't-say-no neighbor, the mother who gave without hesitation. And now I was the cold one, the bitter woman who turned her back on her own child. One night, I sat with all of it. No TV, no distraction, just me and the quiet. And I asked myself the question I knew others were too polite to say out loud. Was I being cruel? The answer came not as a thunderclap, but as a quiet certainty. I had bent over backward for a girl who saw my kindness as weakness, who took and took until there was nothing left but obligation and resentment. Protecting myself wasn't cruelty, it was long overdue. Sometimes love means putting up a wall, not to keep someone out, but to keep yourself from bleeding. I had spent years loving her in the way I thought she needed. Now, I was loving myself in the way I had always deserved. A week later, I received a card in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was hers. Inside was a folded note. I'm sorry for what I said. I was angry, but you didn't have to go this far. I hope one day you can forgive me. I read it once, then again, and then I placed it in the drawer next to the phone, the same drawer that now held my revised will and the list of account closures. I didn't write back. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because apologies, without action, are just words. And I'd learned, finally, how to separate the two. Mornings used to be filled with noise, her alarm going off 3 times before she got out of bed, the bathroom fan running non-stop, cabinet doors slamming as she searched for cereal or whatever she could microwave. Now the house was still. The quiet felt foreign at first, like something I had to tiptoe around. But over time, it started to feel like mine. My space, my silence. The first few days after she moved out were strange. She didn't say goodbye, just texted me that she was leaving and would send someone for her remaining boxes. There was no hug, no apology in person, no final fight. Just absence. I didn't cry. I thought I might. I even prepared for it. Put tissues by the bed and tried to distract myself with a movie the night after she left. But the tears didn't come. Instead, I found myself making tea and sitting out on the porch, watching the sky turn that shade of lavender it only does in early fall. I didn't feel sad. I felt like I could finally exhale, like I had been holding my breath for years and didn't realize how shallow my lungs had grown. The grief, if it was grief, came more like a shadow than a storm, brief flickers of memory, the ghost of her laughter when she was still small, still kind. There were changes I hadn't anticipated. The groceries lasted longer. The laundry bin stayed manageable. The bathroom stayed clean. But there was more than that. I started sleeping through the night. I no longer dreaded coming home. I made dinner for myself and sat at the table with a book. I listened to music I hadn't touched in years, stuff I used to love before motherhood became a full-time performance of giving. I started keeping fresh flowers in the kitchen. It wasn't about being fancy. It was about claiming something beautiful just for me. One morning, I even found myself humming while I vacuumed, and I stopped mid-step, shocked by the sound of my own contentment. People kept asking if I missed her. Some meant well. Others just wanted to gossip. I gave them all the same answer. I miss who she used to be. And it was the truth. I missed the child who used to bring me wildflowers from the backyard, who used to ask me to braid her hair and giggle when I got it wrong. I didn't miss the woman who walked over my heart with dirty shoes and called it growth. That version of her, the one who belittled me in whispers and demanded love like a landlord collecting rent, I didn't mourn her departure. I welcomed it. Eventually, her name stopped coming up in every conversation. The concerned calls from family slowed. Even the stares at church softened, as people found new things to whisper about. Time did what it always does. It moved forward, indifferent to the wreckage or the recovery. I started seeing a therapist. Not for her, for me. I needed help untangling the knot I'd become. I needed to hear someone say it was okay to choose myself. And that's what I had done. Not just once, but daily. Every time I said no. Every time I didn't pick up her call. Every time I closed my eyes and reminded myself that boundaries are a form of love. One afternoon, I received a message on Facebook. It was from her. Short, not angry. Just 2 lines. I hope you're doing okay. I know I messed up. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I wanted to say that. I read it 3 times. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because I didn't feel compelled to. It wasn't a door opening. It was a leaf falling. Maybe she was beginning to understand. Maybe not. Either way, it wasn't my job to chase her. Not anymore. I had spent too many years running after someone who never looked back. There is peace in the quiet. It's not loud or glorious. It's subtle. It's sipping coffee while the sun rises. It's lighting a candle at night and reading until I doze off. It's taking walks and not checking my phone every 5 minutes. It's no longer feeling like I have to prove my worth to someone who treats it like an inconvenience. I still think about her. I still wonder if she's eating enough, if she's found work, if she ever stares at the ceiling and thinks of me. But I no longer feel responsible for her healing. That's her work now. My work is me. I'm not sure what the future holds. Maybe one day she'll come back, not just physically, but emotionally, honestly. If she does, I'll listen. But I won't bend. I won't shrink. I've found too much of myself in the silence to ever go back to the noise. And if she doesn't come back, then I'll keep living this new version of peace I've built. Not perfect, not pain-free, but honest. And that's more than enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength, or if it helped you see your boundaries as sacred instead of selfish, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like mine be heard. And maybe, just maybe, helps someone else stand a little taller in their own silence. See you soon in the next story.